Hello, everyone. Are you guys still awake out there? I'm going to be the last speaker of the day, but I want to just start this off by saying, will you raise your hands if you work in the food movement, if that's how you make your living? Or if you, and so the rest of you guys are here just learning. It is absolutely a pleasure to be working in the food movement. It's such an interesting meeting of minds. We all come from very different backgrounds often, but we find this kind of common ground within food. And so it's such a pleasure, and it's been such a pleasurable day to spend here interacting with so many different people. I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story. My particular way that I got here was I grew up on a cattle ranch in Texas, and this is me when I was a little kid picking berries out in the fields. And I got to learn about agriculture from all of these little old German ladies who hardly even spoke English, but had a whole set of language that they used about the plants and the little bugs and all of the things that kind of colonized their gardens. And then I grew up, and I moved to New York City, where there's more concrete than there is dirt by a long shot. And I went to New York because I wanted to learn about technology. I went to a program called the Interactive Telecommunications Program at NYU, and I'm now a teacher there. I teach people much like many of our other speakers we've had today. I've been in this industry for almost 8 years now, and it looks so much different from when I first started. And it's just absolutely incredible to see all of the new minds and the new projects who are coming up over time. So as a teacher, we don't really teach. We're really kind of channeling the people who are in the program, all of these entrepreneurs like ones we've seen today. And these are some of the values that we talk about when we're designing these new technologies. So first of all, it's not about the technology. It's not about the gadget. It's not about the solution to the problem. It's actually about the people. And so one of the first and most important things when we're designing something as important as agriculture is to build a community and to learn from that community. We believe absolutely in just getting to work right away, but while actively listening and by testing on the ground. So you're going to make something, and you're going to put it out there and present it to your community. But you should never get attached to the things that you make, because you're always going to be learning something new, and inevitably you're going to have to toss out a good part of whatever you thought was a brilliant idea, and you're going to have to start over on a pretty much constant basis. So my particular area that I found that I really loved when I went through this program was food. So the food movement was just beginning. It was 2007, 2008, and in the food movement, we have these terms that we use a lot that are getting more and more popular that you hear people say. Things like, we need to change our food system. Or things like, I want to know where my food comes from. Well, with my training, having gone to the Interactive Telecommunications Program, I asked, what the hell do we mean by that? Really, when it really boils down to it, we've kind of gotten to a point where we feel like we understand what we're saying there, but there's actually a lot of depth to it. So what I have been dedicating the last 8 years of my life to is listening to the food movement and really wondering, what are these questions? What are we really looking for? So I'm going to go back to my story a little bit. Being in New York City, having moved there from the farm, I really found myself missing that experience of gardening and of being around food and a real depth and quality of food. And so looking at how I was going to deal with that, living in a city in a long term, I was learning a lot, I was hearing a lot, reading a lot about hydroponics and aquaponics and all of these kind of high technologies that were being used in the commercial world. And I set out to make one for myself. In my New York City apartment. So I built a contraption, make first. I built a contraption out of a whole bunch of old water bottles, a leaky pump, and eventually kind of worked through many iterations of it until it got to be pretty effective and efficient for the time. But at the same time, I realized that I was not alone. There are now, the vast majority of us have moved to cities, and I won't go through that whole pitch because many other people have talked about why this is so important. But I recognized that I was not alone, and I really wanted to develop that community and share my learning process with lots of other people. So I put the designs for the system that I'd made online and developed on a social media community where I posted it and let all kinds of people from all around the world come and download the instructions and make different versions of the system, so that over time we ended up actually going through about 12 different iterations and constantly changing this design. Over the course of the last 6 years, we now have over 50,000 people around the world who have built what we call Windowfarms. So these vertical hydroponic gardens that are going in your window. We've made aquaponic versions, and all of these different kind of threads of development have come off of this project over time. Again, the whole point of this is to be listening to the community, listening for what do we want, and developing out the threads that are the most common, the things that the most people want to see. And I've had the exquisite pleasure of being able to travel all around the world and interact with these communities over time. So eventually I started getting many pictures back from people who had built all different kinds of systems all around the world. And pretty soon there were pictures from pretty much every corner of the earth of people running Windowfarms. Not only that, but they were also teaching many other people about it as well. So it was a viral movement that was spreading all over the place. And from there, I decided to make a modular version of it that was already pre-made, but was culled from many of the community's designs. In 2011, really early in Kickstarter's life, I put this on there and raised $257,000 to get these first systems made. I now still run the company, and we now have added on another component of essentially shipping people live food plants. So what we do is we collaborate with greenhouse growers who grow seedlings, and then we use some special packaging and we drop ship them directly to people so they can put into their Windowfarms and kind of keep a live garden growing without necessarily having to go through the whole process of growing seedlings for themselves. It also allows us to support a community of growers who often want to diversify the kinds of species they have in their greenhouses, but have a hard time justifying that financially because it's not necessarily financially rewarding. Over time, this has just really given me an experience of getting to interact with thousands and thousands of people. So my team and I built this vertical garden, an array of Windowfarms at the American Museum of Natural History as part of the food exhibition that's now here with National Geographic in the back of the exhibition. And over 1 million visitors came through, and we got to teach them about hydroponics and aquaponics and so forth. But I also got to listen to them, again, for that question of what are we really looking for? Then I did a TED Talk, and it went from having spoken to thousands of people to all of a sudden having a reach of millions of people. So what an incredible experience and privilege to have that many people lending me their ear and to be able to communicate with them back. So I've been collecting essentially a list of people who I've been communicating with back and forth. And I started to undertake a deep data mining project to look at this very question of what do we really want in the food movement. So I took a lot of our own internal data from a list of over 100,000 people's emails. I did a little evil big brother, but actually for a very good cause, and basically was able to find a whole bunch of information out about these people. So like what their jobs were, what they most frequently like to tweet about, for example. And we used that, put it all into a big spreadsheet and parsed it in order to find the things that people wouldn't necessarily say to me when I was interacting with them one-on-one. I also did some very global analysis. So this is Google Trends. And if we look at this, it starts to show us some of the patterns of what we're really thinking in the food movement. So one of the first kind of terms or memes that started to spread back in 2005 was food safety. So, we were really concerned about, there was a lot of fear involved, and that was what was motivating kind of the first wave of the food movement. The second level that happened was that many people started getting really interested in pesticides. So no longer was it just about pathogens. It was about what is this poison that I'm putting in my body? What is it doing to me? What's it doing to my children? But over time, actually, those two terms have disappeared a little bit. Then another set of terms started to come into our common parlance. Probiotic, for example. Nutrient dense, that one's kind of just recently been picking up steam. Kale, we have to actually shrink the entire graph so that you can see what an incredible word of mouth, viral experience we have had around kale. So if we look at that and we kind of reduce that all down and we look at what's actually happening here, we're moving from a point of being worried about poisons to actually talking about what beneficial aspects of food we can get. So I would say that the change in that graph represents globally education. We are moving past some initial fears and ideas, and globally as a community, as a society, we are picking that apart. We are starting to become highly educated and developing these new and evolving paths for looking at how can food actually become something that is nutritious and beneficial and actually good for our health. Now that may sound a little bit like a no-brainer, but you have to remember that there was a while where that wasn't what we were optimizing for. We were optimizing for efficiency. My grandfather's era was all about making it so that people didn't have to work on the farm, didn't have to spend as much time cooking. But we've really changed that. Would you guys mind playing the video now? So here you can see the word probiotic moving. So it starts in one area, and then it starts to spread all across the United States. That same pattern is being replicated. Can we go back to the slides, please? Thank you. That same pattern is being replicated all around the world. I just came back from China, where when you walk around in the food movement, there's definitely food safety, and pesticides are a much more common term there. I actually heard that food safety is now the #3 search term. The Mandarin version of that word is the #3 search term in China right now. I also heard from a few young people them starting to talk about organics, but how they have absolutely no trust in organics because there's no regulation for it around there, and it's sometimes just adopted as a marketing term. But so going back and taking kind of that global set of data, I have been bringing that back into my community and into the many interactions that I get to have with people and listening for what are these messages. And one of the main conclusions that I've come to is that what we're looking for is food as medicine. You will start to hear that term coming up much more often right now. And again, it seems like a no-brainer, right? We've got to eat. Why that's just such an easy thing, right? Well, the thing is that we're not optimizing for food as medicine in agriculture and in the modern agriculture movement yet. But that's what the future is. So when we look at our bodies and the reason why we eat, doctors talk about that from the standpoint of what are called metabolic pathways. So, and we have lots of problems with this because we don't know who we can trust. We don't have a lot of language around this, and we don't right now have a very good connection between the medical field and all of this new burgeoning knowledge that's happening in the agricultural field. So what's missing and what is absolutely going to come, whether we like it or not, is a partnership between the medical community, the nutrition community, and agriculture. So it turns out that after kind of looking through all of this, and I had a happy connection of the kind that we have so often in the food movement. My mom is a doctor. This is my mom, Margaret, and she has actually been asking herself this question for about the last 15 years. Why don't Western medical doctors study enough the role of diet and nutrition in the human body? Why are we constantly just looking immediately to drugs? Why aren't we really giving more often dietary recommendations to our patients as a first line of defense? And then I've been asking the question, what if we as growers actually optimized for the human body? It would definitely, we have often been so focused on this technology that's right in front of us and doing a good job of growing. But now is the time for us to bring in knowledge actually about the human body and to make a little bit of an extension and a reach out to the medical world so that we know what to optimize for. So my mom and I have been looking at this and breaking this down. We're working on a book and on a project that will basically build off of this. And these are some of the channels that we've been looking at. So first of all, nutrient density, right? That one's pretty obvious. It's already kind of in the common parlance. But if we really take a deeper look at what would that mean to optimize for human metabolic pathways. So what's a metabolic pathway? One of my favorite biologists, a gentleman named Tyler Volk, he says that the human body is more like a whirlpool of cells than it is a mountain. And that's because each one of our systems has cells that have a different lifespan. Some of those cells change over very quickly, like our skin cells. And other cells, like our brain and our heart, those change over a much shorter period of time, but they're much more reliant on other cells that help them make connections. So what we need to do is to get to a point where we can actually be, oh, pardon me, I forgot to say something here. So as these cells change over very quickly, what's replacing them? It's actually all coming from our food. So in order to build a new cell, our body needs certain kinds of elements in order to put them together to create different kinds of proteins. And the medical field has been actually making a lot of breakthroughs in that area in recent years. And so there's a lot that we can actually start to learn if we actually reach out and start to develop for them. So for example, when I've gone to a lot of urban agriculture conferences and new agriculture conferences, I often ask growers who are on panels, what do you do to measure nutrient density? And one of the most common things I hear from them is I use a Brix index. So there's a particular little device that lets you essentially measure, what it's measuring is the sugar concentration of a liquid. So tomato growers, that's a very common thing that they will use. But a doctor would say, that's actually measuring sugar. So sugar is not necessarily one of the things that we're trying to optimize for here in developing cells. That may make that tomato taste better, but if we're always just optimizing for things tasting better or looking better or shipping better, we're going to actually be continuing to go down a path that may end us up in the same place that our bigger industrial agriculture system has. So we have a huge opportunity here now during this early development of our industry to find and design tools that create those bridges between our metabolic pathways in our body and the metabolic pathways that our plants are going through. So this is a huge opportunity that we need to be taking advantage of. Another variety of version of this is varietal selection. So doctors who are working in this area and who are focused on nutrition have been, they're in awe as they take tests of how nutrient depleted we are in certain areas. And so many of these doctors are recommending supplements. But what they've found is that still 50% of people who are taking multivitamins and supplements are still nutrient deficient. Our bodies just cannot metabolize in these, even with the highest quality pharmaceutical grade supplements, they're not able to metabolize those ingredients as well as they can with food. And I know this all sounds very dumb. It's like, duh, I should be eating more vegetables, right? Like, we wouldn't all be here if we didn't kind of know that already, right? But we need to go a little bit past just an apple a day keeps the doctor away, that carrots are good for our eyes, kind of these bits of folk knowledge that we have, and we actually need to dig down a little bit deeper. So carrots are good for your eyes. Beta carotene has been demonstrated to be beneficial for numerous aspects of eye health. However, how do we know that the particular varieties that we have selected that ship well again or that sell well in the market are the ones that are the best for ultimately the final goal of what we're trying to get out of growing? That's something that we haven't yet paid enough attention to, and we should. So yeah, there we go, all of our potential carrots. So this woman, for example, she grew so many kinds of vegetables that we can no longer find in the markets. And we're at a point where many of those varieties are really, going extinct without the work of the seed banks and so forth. So that's another potential connection that we can make, is what are the nutritional values of the different kinds of varieties that we're preserving in a lot of the seed bank movement. Finally, antioxidants. Someone mentioned that before, which I'm really glad to see it's coming on the radar. Just recently, a new study came out. There's always all kinds of debate about whether organic is better or conventional growing, including hydroponics and aquaponics and so forth, is better. And for the first time, a study that looked at 343 other studies conclusively showed that between 18 and 69% more that there's up to 69% higher antioxidant quantity in organics, which gives us all kinds of potential benefits to the body. So that's something that we really should be looking at. But why is organic better than conventional? We don't know that yet. And what could we learn if we did actually look into this a little bit farther? How could that take those of us who are doing controlled environment agriculture, how could we do better those sorts of things that organic growers are doing in these controlled environments that we're creating? Finally, this may be, the microbiome may be the greatest scientific endeavor of our age. We're just now learning how much the human gut and the bacteria on our skin, how much of a role that plays in all of our health. Studies have shown recently that, surprisingly, our gut bacteria can be immensely responsible for our mood, our ability to think properly, and for these aspects of our being that are absolutely core to our health. So there may be aspects, again, of growing and the full microbiome that our plants are involved in that can also be transmitted in a beneficial way. So instead of just wiping out all bacteria because we're worried that they're going to contain a pathogen, if we actually started paying attention to the different types of bacteria and trying to cultivate the good ones and find other methods of dealing with the pathogenic ones, there's a huge amount of opportunity there that we could use, given that our microbiome is established by the food that we or our mother ate when she was pregnant with us. So stepping back and asking, what is the bigger vision that we would all be looking for, that we're all seeming to poke for when we're looking at this new evolution of the food system? What if we managed the entire food supply chain as a metabolic pathway that was going to end up creating human cells? At that point, we would start to be able to truly have a system of trust that would be backed up not just by that friendly face of the farmer at the farmer's market who you trust, but also by thousands and thousands of human beings who have taken the Hippocratic Oath and have dedicated their lives to making sure that the human body and that our social health survives. So that's it. Thank you all so much for having me, and let's give a hand for an amazing day today, right?